Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Kelsey Pepitone, and I am the Clean Energy Outreach Manager for Chambers for Innovation in Clean Energy, or CICE for short. CICE is a national network of chambers of commerce and economic development organizations working to advance the clean energy economy. At CICE, we're focused on the transformational economic opportunities that clean energy projects, such as large-scale solar installations, can deliver to communities and businesses across the country. The Grand Canyon State ranked 9th for photovoltaic solar installations in the US last year, adding a whopping 861 megawatts to the electric grid. This is an almost 26% increase over 2022. So it's a really exciting time to be talking about solar in Arizona, and we're looking forward to a great discussion today. We're pleased to be partnering with Arizona Forward on this webinar, and I'd like to welcome Aaron Mayor, Senior Vice President of HDR Engineering and Chair of the Board for Arizona Forward, to the webinar. Welcome, Aaron, and over to you.
Oh, thank you, Kelsey. We're very excited today with Arizona Forward partnering with CICE on this webinar. And if you're not aware of Arizona Forward is an organization we've been around for over 5 decades, providing leadership to Arizona. We started as Valley Forward back in 1969 and really focused on air quality issues at that time and have evolved over the years into a state organization. Our organization consists of a mix of business and civic leaders focused on cooperative efforts to improve environmental sustainability, economic vitality of our state and our local regions. And one of our focus areas this year and into the future is really our Energy and Climate Action Committee, which dovetails very well with the discussion today, as we're very interested in the expansion of renewables into the state and our local region, as we're facing some very serious challenges with air quality. As EPA is likely to move us at some point here from moderate to serious on non-attainment. Renewables and solar will be part of that portfolio that continues to expand the capacity and also addresses emissions. So, Kelsey, back to you, but we're very excited. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Aaron, for your partnership both on this webinar and beyond. Before we begin, I want to encourage all of our members of the audience to submit your questions throughout today's discussion in the Q&A portal located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will hope to get through most, if not all of them, during our session, and we will see what we can fit in that hour. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our 3 excellent panelists that we have with us today. First, we have Heidi Rotz, Deputy Director of Market and Policy Innovation for the Clean Energy Buyers Association, Rebecca Kelly, Vice President of Development with Long Road Energy, and Justin Peterson, Senior Vice President of Operations for Renewable Energy at McCarthy Building Companies. Thank you all so much for sharing your time and expertise with us. I want to start by asking each of you to take a couple of minutes to answer the following questions, and in turn, share a bit more about your background. Rebecca, we'll start with you. What do you see as the most significant opportunity for Arizona and the US with the expansion of large-scale solar generation?
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Great to be here with you all today. As Kelsey said, my name is Rebecca Kelly. I lead Long Road's development activities in the state of Arizona. So we develop renewable projects in Arizona that's principally solar and battery at a very large scale. So we aren't involved in rooftop or smaller scale projects, but think those are an important element of the business. But that's not what we do. We do the large scale power plant developments. And we have several projects under construction right now in Arizona, more projects in the works. And we think that Arizona is facing an incredible opportunity. There's so much load growth, so much development of residential, commercial, manufacturing. You see so much growth, fastest growing metropolitan area in the country, in the greater Phoenix area. And to back that up, you need additional energy sources. And solar and battery is an incredibly economical and huge opportunity for Arizona to have all this economic development and do so sustainably. There's obviously a ton of solar resource in the state. It's very sunny. And it's really an awesome opportunity for the state.
Thank you. Heidi?
Thanks, Kelsey. So yeah, I am the Deputy Director of Market and Policy Innovation with the Clean Energy Buyers Association. So just a little more background on who CEBA is. We're a business association of large clean energy customers, their service providers, their energy providers, and partner NGOs. And I think this is a really fun question. A lot of our large energy buyers are looking to expand solar and to work with developers. And we see there's a huge opportunity right now around power sharing and regionalization for the West. So we see a future where Arizona can share power with as many other Western states as possible, will really unlock solar development, and that will ripple into economic development for the state. And if you don't mind, I just have a few examples. We have found studies that if Arizona could trade power with the widest footprint possible, we could see up to 440 new megawatts of new solar, and clean energy, and all energy customers could start seeing savings in their energy costs of around 142 million per annual, and the state economy could grow by 2.7 billion a year. So just want to put some numbers to this opportunity because it's pretty big.
Wow, that's excellent, Heidi. Thank you for that. Justin, over to you.
Appreciate it, Kelsey. Justin Peterson, Senior Vice President for McCarthy Building Companies. So we are in the renewable energy world, we are an EPC. We engineer, procure, and construct. So we are that cradle to grave partner with Rebecca, her team, other utility scale developers, and additionally work direct with some of the power providers, APS and others across the country. McCarthy is historically, we are a 160-year-old general contractor. We are one of the large general contractors in Arizona that does a lot of infrastructure work, schools, hospitals, water, wastewater facilities. And over the last 20 years, we have been in the renewable energy space, focused on photovoltaic and battery storage. And one of the things that I am really excited about is partnering with our clients, our developers, on that land use, being good stewards, developing these projects, and then secondarily, solar and renewable energy in general, the opportunities that it provides for not only jobs on projects, but ultimately career growth. It provides a different entry point into the construction market for a lot of people. And so seeing those job and career opportunities that are created because of these projects is really something that's special and unique.
Thanks, Justin. We're definitely going to drill down a bit more on those job opportunities later on in our discussion. But just to kick us off and kind of thinking through kind of the current state of play in Arizona, Rebecca, could you talk a little bit about the Sunstream projects that you all have developed, and I understand in partnership with McCarthy? Where's this energy going, and what made the area ideal for generation at this scale?
Absolutely. So the Sunstreams projects are multi-phase development of solar and battery storage installations. They're located in western Maricopa County, and these are pretty large scale installations. On the whole, the Long Road projects in this area are over 6,000 acres of total footprint. They can generate a lot of power. They can generate enough power that could run over 200,000 average American homes. So it makes a substantial impact on the resiliency and reliability of the Arizona grid. And these projects also include battery storage components. And that is particularly important because the peak load on the grid happens in the late afternoon and evening hours. And so for the most part, that's when people get home from work, they, crank up the air conditioner at home, and you see the demand on the grid. This information is out there all over the place. And that's when the peak is. It's like 4 to 8 p.m. usually in the summer. And so you say, okay, it's in the summer. We can generate a lot of solar power in the summer because it's very sunny. But it's sunniest in the middle of the day. And so pairing batteries with the solar, which we do out at Sunstreams and it occurs on most new projects in Arizona, you can charge the batteries in the middle of the day when you're generating all that solar energy, and then discharge the batteries into the grid, use that energy later in the day. So those are just kind of a couple facts about the projects. They're located at a location where there was already a lot of transmission infrastructure. And so by that, we mean existing high voltage power lines. Those are the big power line structures you can see, out in the desert, and some existing substations. And so those are the most efficient locations to inject this power because it means you don't have to build very long new transmission lines to connect remote solar installations with the existing electrical grid. As Kelsey and Justin mentioned, we have built these projects in partnership with the McCarthy team. So Justin's company, they have built the projects that Longroad has developed out there. And on the whole, these projects have created over 1,000 construction jobs. So really a lot of benefits there. And there also are substantial tax and other benefits for the community financially. So solar projects generate sales and use tax and property tax. And there are other avenues, such as if land is leased from the state land department, those rental revenues go to the citizens of Arizona and specifically the schools. So just a couple highlights about those projects we're particularly excited about in Western Maricopa County.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. And that's it. The Sunstreams projects are just a significant investment in Arizona overall. And it's, of course, we oftentimes hear about this direct revenue generation, and you mentioned jobs. But Justin, I want to turn to you to hear a little bit more about some of these, both direct and indirect impacts of these projects.
Yeah, so like Rebecca was saying, I mean, Sunstreams is a unique facility, but we're starting to see more and more of it, where these projects are concentrated in certain areas. Sunstreams is obviously one that, as mentioned, it has multiple phases. So being constructed over a span of multiple years. As Arizona Governor Hobbs indicated, brought in revenue of 300 million that's going to local schools and communities of tax revenue. So there's twofold. As mentioned by Rebecca, you've got the land leases that's impacting locally, and then selling that power, that's revenue that's being continually generated and being taxed, that's staying there in those communities. The other piece on it, and Rebecca mentioned jobs, over 1,000 jobs. It's also careers. I mean, it is. These are good paying jobs. These are good paying careers. And what McCarthy is really passionate about is, focusing on hiring local employees. These are individuals that, they might have been working in fast food restaurants or in retails that it's, quite honestly, they're not as high paying jobs as the construction market. And what's been created through Sunstreams and projects like that is these individuals are able to go learn a new skill and then stick with that skill and start building a true career. We're able to do outreach again within those local communities, ability to bring veterans on board, really throw a wide net to offer a less intimidating entry point usually to the construction industry. A lot of times the vertical trades, when we're building buildings, vertical buildings, and having to go to trade school before you can get a job, sometimes that might be a barrier of entry. On the renewable energy sector, that training is happening usually on site, on these campuses, on the facilities. And so it is allowing us to hire locally, create those great jobs, those sustainable careers, and partner with the local communities there. In addition to that, obviously, when the facilities are being constructed, there's that initial cost of construction, which is spurring economic growth and stimulus in that local environment, in addition to just the people that are, we're talking hundreds and sometimes thousands of employees and construction workers building these projects, and they need places to stay. They're eating food. So they are in these communities, being part of the communities, being stewards, and also stimulating and supporting other parts of the community beyond just the project itself.
Thanks, Justin. And yeah, I think oftentimes in these conversations about the job impacts of large-scale solar projects, what's lost is that these short-term jobs, even if they're front-loaded, oftentimes at the beginning of the project life cycle, they're transformative. They're good paying jobs, they're stable jobs. And like you said, I really like that career launching perspective as well. So thank you for that perspective. Heidi, I'm going to come back to you to talk a little bit more about CIBA and your membership, and give us a little bit of insight into why your members are interested in issues around reliability, generation. What are some of their priorities in this regard? And a bit more granularly, why are buyers going beyond purchasing and engaging in these kind of policy-oriented discussions?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I already talked a little bit about different types of members we have, so maybe I'll just give you more detail on the large clean energy buyers. So all of our large energy buyers have clean energy goals they're working towards. And what might not be obvious is how much diversity we have across these clean energy buyers. I was just looking this morning at our members in Arizona. And I see a wide range of industries, everything from big box retailers to restaurants, food and beverage, convenience, tech companies, communications, and even defense. So it really runs the gamut. And I would say across our membership, we have some members who are early in their clean energy journey, and they're learning from being part of the association, how to put together a clean energy project, how to move forward on their goals. But we also have a lot of members who've been at this for a while and are really advanced. And I think these members can really be thought leaders on what clean energy projects can look like, in terms of how do we maximize the clean energy impact that a project is going to have? How do we minimize the impact on communities? So we have some really advanced buyers who are thought leaders and experts on clean energy, which kind of leads me into that other question: why are they engaging on policy? So much of what is going to determine our ability to do projects with developers depends on policy and the market structure that's there. So by engaging in market expansion or policy, they can really shape their opportunities and benefit everyone by creating those new opportunities. And I also think that our members have a unique role in just building awareness between these clean energy projects and goals, and how that impacts the community through economic development. And I already put out some estimates around markets earlier, but I think just making sure that folks see that connection is really helpful. And then maybe the last thing I'd point out is, because our members are so advanced and they are able to get deep on these policy issues and create more opportunity for everyone, one of the things that they can actually do, because they have so much experience trying to transact in these regulatory environments or a market, is point out what they need. So as we're looking at market expansion, we can tell people who are working on those issues, those state decision makers or a market operator who's standing up a market, this is what I need to get a deal done. This is what you can do in this market to provide transparency. And I think that's really helpful, and it's a good gap to fill.
Great. And I'm actually, that leads us right into our next question. So I'm actually going to stick with you, Heidi, to continue that thought. What are some of those things that they need from a policy perspective? What are these asks that they're looking for that currently aren't being met?
Absolutely. There's a lot of them. But just to keep on the market's focus, I'll talk a little bit about the need for an organized wholesale market. So I know that's maybe a new phrase for some, but basically it's just this idea of, can your state trade with other states? Are your utilities trading with other utilities? And through this regionalization, are we maximizing the lowest cost clean energy resources for everyone? And we talked a little bit about the nature of solar already. It's important, again, because of that time component. You know, Arizona has great solar resources that other states need at other times, and being able to use what could have been curtailed or to really ramp up exports so that other states can benefit is fantastic. And I would say one of the things that our members have been looking at is finding that geographic scope that's going to allow us to maximize benefits. So we've really been advocating for states to move towards a market that has the widest footprint, and having that geographic diversity between, you know, solar in one place, but wind in the other, and when they're available, making the grid bigger than the weather is really important. And one thing that I'd mentioned about this bigger footprint too is, you know, the weather is variable, but also when we're using energy is variable. Think about, you know, Arizona being one part of the day and a state being in another part. There's a diversity of load. So who's pulling energy off the grid? So that's been one of our big priorities.
Great. Rebecca, I'm going to turn to you from your perspective. What are some of the most important challenges that you're facing as a developer in Arizona, and what needs to happen in order for Arizona to kind of unleash its full potential in deployment?
Great question. I think I'll start by just saying Arizona is doing, on the whole, a really good job. You know, we see a lot of megawatts going in the ground every year. So it's a great market, and we're excited about what's ahead. I think one of the key facts to understand is that more and more energy is needed. There are a lot of different utilities operating in the state of Arizona. The two largest ones are APS and SRP. And they both released projections that show they need new energy coming online pretty consistently for the next 5, 10 plus years. And so that means at a system level, we need to have the transmission available for new projects to plug into the grid. And we need to support permitting and land use efforts for these projects to be ready to start construction soon. You know, things need to happen quickly. And as I said, on the whole, the state of Arizona is doing a really good job. All these different systems are separate. You know, different counties have different permitting requirements, different timelines. The different utilities operate their systems differently, and that's just the nature of this industry and the electric system. But kind of, if all of these different groups that are responsible for their own element, just they need to understand that this is a priority, you know, at a state level and really a systems economic level for the continued development of manufacturing and data centers and the residential growth that's happening. We need to also support new power generation to supply energy for that. Yeah.
Justin?
Yeah, to kind of dogpile on a couple of Rebecca's comments. I mean, we are seeing in Arizona, and quite honestly in certain areas across the country, some opposition to photovoltaic and battery storage. So you know, one of the largest challenges that we see to make things so that our development partners, our utilities can navigate, is that land use. Mojave County just passed a year-long moratorium. There's similar opposition going right now in Yavapai County. And so, you know, just a lot of that stems from misperception and lack of knowledge about what these facilities truly are. And quite honestly, the safety that goes into both designing and constructing these utility scale solar facilities. So that will be a big piece for all of us to tackle here in the coming days, years, as the need for power continues. Another piece is the supply chain, making sure that we are driving more and more domestic supply, helping with not only the job creation here locally, but also just the ease of getting some of these products and not relying so heavily on international supply. And then the last big piece that I would hit on from a potential challenge is the workforce development. You know, there is a lot of focus on the careers and the jobs created by domestic manufacturing in the solar industry, but about 80% of the entire workforce is focused on installation, and that's across all PV. So that includes, yes, rooftop and utility scale combined, but there are a lot of jobs that it takes to install these facilities, and right now those workers, they're not out there. They're not trained, and so that is going to be a huge lift for contractors like McCarthy and really the entire industry, making sure that we are recruiting, we are training, and then more importantly, we are retaining for the long term, so that those workers are able to continue in this industry.
Justin, you brought up a lot of points that I want to return to. So I guess I'll start with the workforce development piece, since that's where you ended. Can you talk a little bit about how, if it has, how that piece has been impacted over the last few years by the Inflation Reduction Act, and kind of what you're seeing in McCarthy and what you all are implementing kind of within your company?
Yeah, so you know, the Inflation Reduction Act obviously has helped, not really, I guess you could say it has stimulated growth, but really it has increased the trajectory, right? It's increased the velocity that we are able to move forward with some of these projects. And really a lot of that focus has been on the workforce development. So the apprenticeship programs that have been put in place, the prevailing wage requirements, making sure that these are really good paying jobs, that they're not just minimum wage jobs, but these are jobs that people can support their entire family with. As I mentioned earlier, you know, as we're expanding our workforce, and as we partner in these typically more rural communities, it allows us to access an entire different group of entry-level workers. I mentioned earlier in the discussion, you know, lots of people that were in the fast food industry or retail industry. They probably never considered going into construction. However, when these are really good paying jobs, they can learn a new skill set and create a career. It spurs them to come in and want to try it, and then partner that with an apprenticeship program where 2 to 4 years of on-job training, you know, it really gives them a broader grasp of the construction industry. One of the other really great things, you know, with us being a large general contractor doing other market segments as well, once those workers have come in and they decide that they potentially want to try something out, they might go pursue another trade with us in the vertical markets. So go become a carpenter and start doing you know, vertical construction. Go become an electrician to build other infrastructure projects or other healthcare facilities. And so, that's really one of the things that we're seeing is, again, that increased demand for workers, but it just continues to open the door into other markets for great long-term careers.
That is a great point, Justin, the piece about this kind of transferability of the skills from these workforce development programs into other sorts of trades. That's wonderful. I don't think that's communicated as frequently in these conversations as it really should be, because that's incredibly valuable. Rebecca, I just wanted to see if you had anything to add on that point of workforce development and how it's impacted you all as a development shop.
I think Justin hit the main points there related to workforce. Just to explain a little more how our companies work together as an example. So we do the development and then we own and operate the projects in the long term. And Justin's company, as an engineering, procurement, and construction company, they provide the bulk of the workforce that actually builds the projects. So they are responsible for sourcing the labor, and we work in partnership with them on all sorts of issues. But in general, we've been very satisfied with the availability of skilled labor and the training programs that folks like McCarthy have put in place for lower skilled workers, including apprenticeship programs.
Great. And switching gears a little bit, I want to return to something that Rebecca brought up in one of her comments about, from her perspective as a developer, Arizona's a great market to be working in right now. It's growing, it's exciting. Heidi, I want to see from the CIBA perspective what you all see as kind of the state of the market in Arizona.
I would say load growth right now and the ability to meet that load is a huge concern for Arizona. It's a concern across all of the US. And right now, I think meeting that growth quickly is something that we've been hearing from folks in Arizona and something we've been keeping an eye on. But on the flip side, it's also an opportunity, right? As our members are needing more and more electricity, the ability to meet that with clean energy is allowing us not just to grow, but grow clean. So we've seen that as a huge benefit for the future. And some of the solutions too, I think have already come up on this call: solar plus storage. These types of projects where you can shift the solar to when you need it is really helpful. And I've mentioned markets a lot as part of the solution so that we can have greater regionalization. But I also think partnerships are really important for us right now. So for example, one of our members, Meta, worked with a utility and a developer. So they worked with Salt River Project and Ørsted, and they recently put together a solar plus storage project that is not only going to help them meet their growing demand, but the excess energy from that project will be available to the rest of the utilities customers. So going beyond impact to their own needs and helping the community larger.
Great. Thank you so much. And Justin, Rebecca, I'm hoping maybe you can tag team this question a little bit. Justin, given that McCarthy is involved in all sorts of infrastructure projects, and you mentioned that there are differences between the renewable energy development versus, its other forms of infrastructure projects, I wonder if you could speak a bit more about what kind of those on the ground differences are, the opposition that you face within communities, some of the trigger points there, and maybe as a second question, how you prioritize community engagement in order to kind of navigate those situations of opposition.
Great questions, and yes. Definitely some challenges on them. So McCarthy, we pride ourselves on being a community builder. We, from both our salaried personnel and our craft employees, all of our McCarthy craft employees, they have the exact same benefits as I do, from health, vision, dental, 401k. These are truly, they're not temporary workers. These are employees of our organization that know Long Road and our clients very, very well and personally. So, as we come into these communities, a lot of our people, a lot of both our salaried and craft employees are already part of those communities. So making sure that we're listening, that we're hearing those concerns from the community and partnering with them to address their concerns. Also, from a community engagement standpoint, we're not just there to build these projects. We understand that we are guests in these communities, and trying to engage and partner with the municipalities, local fire departments, search and rescue, helping them work through different emergency response training. There's a lot of benefit that beyond just the construction that we can partner with the local communities and the workforces to make sure that we're being good stewards and guests in these communities.
Yeah, and Kelsey, you were asking about how different types of projects may receive different responses. And that's absolutely correct. But I think that the thing I'll add to that is that every project is different, every jurisdiction is different, every community is different. And so the particular issues are just as much a product of the type of project you're developing, whether it's a solar project or a mini mall or an airport, as it is a product of the community. What's happening in the surrounding area? Are there neighbors nearby or in maybe the immediate proximity? Are people going to be able to see the project? Are they going to drive by the project? What matters in that area? And so we approach every project specific to that location and community and, kind of what may be going on or of interest to the community members.
Great. Yeah, that's great to hear. So much of the community engagement piece comes from very place-informed approaches. So I'm glad to hear that you both are incorporating that, and that Justin McCarthy being such a longstanding partner on the community engagement front is really great to hear as well. Heidi, I'm going to direct a question to you that we received in the Q&A portal. Data centers have been mentioned on the call, but this person has asked, according to the utilities, 1/2 to 2/3 of the load growth is from data centers. How are companies handling the responsibility versus having these how's the responsibility shared for handling this kind of burst in load growth?
Absolutely. And I would say, to start off, I think a lot of groups right now are doing some work to understand exactly what future load growth will look like at a higher level, which I think is a great exercise for us to do. So there's a recent Brattle report that CIBA contributed to that not only talks about how much demand growth we expect in the future, but it also talks about the different types of loads. So what loads are more likely to shift where they are or shift their timing? How do different types of loads showing up, data centers versus manufacturing or electrification, how they differ and what they even look like? And I think that's an important education aspect of all this. And then as far as, responsibility and who's really moving forward on improving that, I would say one big area for opportunity across all of the West, including Arizona, is finding some best practices for how customers and utilities are talking to each other. So making sure that there's some early communication, there's open lines of communication, and we're moving towards some best practices on how you talk about future demand growth and load would be a really helpful thing for us to work on.
Great, thank you. There's also a question about the state of decommissioning in the industry. Justin, Rebecca, if either one of you want to speak a little bit to the current state of decommissioning and that piece of the development process.
Yeah, and I can start a little bit, and then Rebecca, turn it off to you. And I saw another question in the chat of disposing of these panels when they reach end of life. So most of these projects are modeled out between 20 and 30 years. However, that's after 20 to 30 years, they're still producing at least 80% of the power that they were originally built to. So the degradation of these panels is quite slow. And you know, there's a lot of us in the industry, both developers, people that are way smarter than myself on the technology side, that are trying to figure out how the potential repower of these plants will go. But you know, I'm a firm believer that when these plants are still producing 80% of the power that they were originally designed to 30 years later, it's not like they're a complete loss, right? It's going to take a lot of capital to do the repowering, and they are still producing a lot of really good, clean, reliable power onto the grid. And so, you know, I guess I would focus more on that they are not obsolete in the 20 to 30 years that they're remodeled. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to add on to that or talk about some of the other
Yeah.
requirements for decommissioning.
Yeah, I think that is an important fact just for people to understand. I think decommissioning and disposal of the equipment at end of life is definitely going to be a problem that the industry has to figure out how to solve. And I'm not going to say it's already solved, right? Right now, the bulk of the modules that are being manufactured worldwide are being installed. And so we don't have a tidal wave of decommissioning upon us. And I share Justin's view that even at the end of the modeled life of these projects, they will still be generating a lot of power. And so the path of least resistance will be to keep them installed, generating power. It will be less than they're generating now, but to keep generating power for longer than you know, the base case that is modeled right now. After that, after it is decided, you know, okay, it makes sense to take these panels out of the field. You know, I think there are a couple different things that could happen. Number one, there could be secondary markets for these panels, which are 25% less productive than they are right now, but still definitely functional. You know, so people elsewhere could be interested in this equipment. And we also expect that large scale recycling will be developed. Right now, you know, if you have some modules, let's say they are damaged, they do need to be disposed of in a conventional landfill if they're not recycled. So just to address that question, I think head on.
Great, thank you. Justin, there was a question in the Q&A also about the backgrounds of your workforce. You've mentioned some of the folks who come into these workforce development programs and end up being in the field. Can you just expand a little bit more on that? And also if McCarthy tracks kind of internal data on the workforce makeup?
So yes, we do. You know, these are our employees. They are McCarthy Building Company employees. So absolutely track all of our information on them. And I know there was another question about, you know, a job versus a career, and do they work there locally or do they move state to state? And both. The answer is both. You know, when we are fortunate enough to have a partner like Long Road that is building multiple phases in one area, then those employees that might be from that community, they have a job for multiple years advancing their career. And then, you know, we're also very fortunate that our employees do travel with us. So Long Road develops projects. All of our other developers usually develop projects outside of Arizona too. And so, you know, we are our workers, our craft workforce, and our salaried employees, when they are willing and able to move to continue their career with us, absolutely, we are taking them on the road, going to other projects in other states. And then when that next project comes up, that next need for power in their community, then we're doing everything we can to get them back home and building those projects in their community. In terms of span of our employees and demographics, one of the other things that I'm extremely proud of for the renewable energy industry, for us specifically, the female and minority workforce in our renewable energy sector is a lot higher than the vertical building trades. And again, you know, I think a lot of it does go back to the potentially lower bar of entry and less intimidating skill set to come learn. So, you know, we do have a very broad spectrum of employees that are very diverse backgrounds that are helping us construct these facilities.
Thank you. Heidi, I want to turn to you, and I hate to ask you to predict the future, but I'm going to. When thinking 5 or 10 years in advance, 5 to 10 years in the future, what are some of the kind of key trends or technologies that you imagine will be driving the kind of shape of the Arizona solar market?
That is a good question. And I don't work a lot on specific solar technologies. So Justin or Rebecca, if you want to chime in, feel free to. But I think over the next 5 years, moving towards organized wholesale markets are going to help create a more demand for new solar technologies and make those projects more successful, because just creating that demand, creating a place for developers to sell the excess of their projects and have a place to monetize it. So I do think there's a connection there on driving new technology development. Does anybody else want to chime in on evolving new solar technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bulk of the projects that are planned in the near term and medium term will be solar PV. That's what's most economical. And I know that the utilities in Arizona are very forward-looking, so they are investigating other technologies, including novel technologies for storage. So right now, the storage that's going in is pretty much entirely lithium-ion batteries, but the utilities are investigating other technologies that could work to supplement the fleet of lithium-ion projects that are being installed right now. I mean, when you think about new technologies, I think maybe the other thing I'll add is that power markets are a market, they're competitive. And so if someone invents a new technology that works really well but is incredibly expensive, it's not going to make sense at scale until the costs come down. So, you know, we may see new technologies being installed at pilot or small scales, and that's great at a systems level. You know, the more options that we have for generation technologies, the better I think we all will be. But for projects that are serving big chunks of the load, because it needs to be economical, we need to keep costs down for ratepayers. Really, what we'll see is a lot of proven technologies that are currently available at scale.
And I just add on one last thing. I mean, to Rebecca's point, I look back at the 2000s and 2010s, and technology was, you know, we used to joke that, like, just wait because something better is going to come out tomorrow. You know, higher wattage modules, and really over the last 5 to 7 years, the efficiency on the modules has more than doubled. So now we're using half the land to generate the same amount of power, and that peak is starting to flatten out a little bit. And so to Rebecca's point, we're now seeing different technologies, new, better technologies emerge, not just improving what was there. One of the things that that we're seeing and that we're pivoting to is the use of AI and robotics. We deploy on our projects robotic systems that can on tracks drive up and down the solar facility, and with IR cameras, infrared cameras, they can scan for different things and help us with some of the quality control, quality assurance to make sure that we are delivering an extremely high quality and safe plant. And so that's where we're seeing some of those new technologies come into the renewable energy market that really weren't out there before. And now some of those manufacturing processes are starting to be deployed out into the fields.
That's great. Thank you all. And we're getting a little bit close on time here, so I want to make sure we're able to hear from everybody one last time. So we're going to close with a round robin here. And think big. If you're thinking about writing kind of a development playbook or guidebook for large-scale solar development in Arizona, from your respective positions here, what are one or two sentences that you would make sure to include in that guidebook? And Heidi, we'll start with you.
Sure. This probably isn't a big surprise that I want to say that Arizona should really focus on some market expansion and policy so they can trade with other states. But I also want to come back to one of the questions that was in the chat. You know, one of those things in the playbook really is about meeting community needs. And for large energy customers who are working with developers, you know, we need best practices on what that looks like. So I would say information sharing across developers and buyers and establishing those best practices is really helpful and something that should happen in the near term. And I would also note that the Clean Energy Buyers Institute has started doing some of that work. We have some principles for purpose-driven energy development, and our Beyond the Megawatt project has some resources on what you look for in a project. What are the best practices today to make sure that folks have access to that information?
Rebecca?
Development guidebook. Well, the first thing that comes to mind that I think may be helpful to share is that development takes a long time. There are a lot of different puzzle pieces that need to fit together perfectly in order for us to have a full project that's ready to hand off to someone like Justin's team at McCarthy to build. And so making sure that developers or other people who are involved in the system, maybe community members, landowners, permitting jurisdictions, interconnection utilities, you know, they understand that we may be planning a project for 5 or more years before you see any steel going in the ground. And a lot of that is driven by interconnection timelines. It takes a long time for projects to be studied by the utilities, and that's where the utilities do a lot of technical analyses to prove, you know, can you plug in a large new generation project at this part of the grid, and what are the impacts of that? Do we need to upgrade any equipment on the system to accommodate this new injection of power? So those studies and then the subsequent construction of any upgrades that are needed can take years for sure. You know, just getting the studies takes years, and then the upgrades take a long time. And so I think that is kind of one of the headlines when you're trying to understand how development works and how we need to think about it at a systems level, is that really it takes a lot of time to plan these projects. And so data center customers, for example, they may say, hey, we're moving to Maricopa County. We want to install a huge facility. It's going to represent a lot of jobs. We want to build it in 2 years. You know, if you want to develop a large scale renewable project to serve that load, it's going to take longer than that to get it on the grid. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
I would I'll start with my chapter heading. So to me, a guidebook, it would be engage with the local communities early and often. Be that, be a community partner, be a good neighbor, and be a community steward. Our power grid in Arizona and across the country, it can't be an all or nothing. We need to have different technologies. We need to have different sources. And so how can we engage with the communities to ensure that we're all hearing one another, we're having meaningful conversations, and that we're making sure that these projects are a win-win for everyone. Everything from, if we're going into an agricultural community and adjacent lands, can we put in pollinators to help supplement those areas that we're building in? So just that would be my big piece is how can we all partner together to ensure that these projects are successful and that they have a good outcome for your specific community.
Great. Thank you so much. And on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap up the session here. We'll be sharing a recording of the discussion with all attendees and everyone who registered. We encourage you to share that link with any colleagues who might find it of interest. Thank you so much, Heidi, Justin, Rebecca, for sharing your time and expertise with us today. Thanks also to the Arizona Forward team, Erin Mayor, Lori Singleton. We really appreciate your partnership on this event. And also to my colleagues Ann Feldhusen and Michaela Rodriguez from the CICE team who made this event possible. We really appreciate you joining us today, and thank you so much. Take care.